IDW Sonic Comic Issue 16. After we see Tangle take a bike ride to Tails' workshop, we see Sonic running on a hamster wheel in there with none of the grey goo on him while smiling. I'd expect him to have turned into a robot seconds later after the end of the last issue. I guess despite all of the goo he got on him after not listening to Amy, he didn't get enough of it on him because it wasn't repeated enough exposure. I don't know how long it took for him to get to Tails' workshop and for him to set this up. He can run at super speed, so it could have been seconds to get there, but did he just have the hamster wheel there? Why does he have stuff on his chest and head? Why wouldn't he just tie Sonic up for when he'd inevitably turn to a robot? Tails says he tested for that and he can't infect metal stuff, and Tails says his run back from the mine drove it into remission. How convenient. I mean, I already got on him. If he can just run away and send it away from him and be fine, even though it penetrates the skin instantly, well, that's a Deus Ex Machina if I ever saw one. But at least we get to keep him around for longer. I'm predicting that Tails will contradict him when he says he cured himself. I guess Sonic was just desperate when he said that, because come on, doesn't everyone know what remission means? It's temporary. I don't even know how it could be temporary. What kind of a glitch is that? Why would that be programmed? You'd think he would have had the same fate as that girl animal, but instead, main character syndrome. If it's just delaying the inevitable, then that's even more confusing because it's not there as meta logic to spare us a sad moment entirely, it's just dumb. Sonic wastes a ton of comic space on recapping the Tangle about Eggman. That's unacceptable. After he thinks that he beat it, and I think that it going into remission would only make sense if this was a new Metal Virus variety that Eggman programmed to be like that on purpose to lure his friends into a false sense of security so that it only chooses to robotize him when he's around a bunch of them, instead of it being a confusing glitch. Tails thinks he should warn everyone about the Metal Virus. I guess he somehow hasn't had any downtime to phone all of his friends and tell them about the Metal Virus. I'm glad it's lampshaded multiple times that the name Zombot sounds silly. But if the writer knows it's stupid, why is he continuing to do it anyways? Right now I'm thankful that Sonic's not roboticized. But the cover and the way that the issue was advertised last issue is trying to give away that it won't last. So what's the point of delaying it? The delay just seems like a plot hole for nothing. Meanwhile, Starline asks Eggman in amazement how he managed to build a new flying fortress so quickly. I would assume it's made from the carbon in the air creating carbon nanotubes. Or he went into a pocket dimension where time moved slower. But that makes sense and be cool. Eggman says that it's easy when you have an army of tireless robot slaves. As in normal robots or Robians. This is like old Archie again. And I can't help but appreciate that. If only because I liked the issues where there was robotization more. That reminds me. I read that the Metal Virus is actually an unused concept from the reboot. One of the sub-bosses in the reboot wanted to try out a new form of robotization on Tassel Boy, and apparently that was planned to be the Metal Virus. Good thing the reboot got canned in time, because I just know Flynn would have jumped at the chance to roboticize all of the Sad AM characters. They'd probably be gotten out of the way quick, and having that happen to Sally would just be adding insult to injury. It seems like an actual continuation of Archie to read an arc that was planned for the reboot. And the only difference is the lack of the Freedom Fighters. And again, if they were here, they'd just be victims of this anyways. They were very lucky they got spared from it. They dodged a bullet. So, is Starline gonna become opposed to the Metal Virus? Because he assumes the Badniks made the Flying Fortress. Eggman says that some Badniks are meant for building and some for war. But the size of his forts is limited by the amount of time it takes to construct the shells and put animals in them. Soon that'll be a thing of the past. He's talking like all of his robots are badniks, and that's how it has to be. But we saw tons of egg ponds earlier. Starline smirks beside him as Orbot initiates the launch sequence. After a miniature Ark launches into the air, making me wonder what took him so long after he saw the Ark in SC2, but I guess he was really attached to the Death Egg instead. And I'm just relieved that he has a flying fortress that's not called the Death Egg again. Though that doesn't make an imitation Ark super creative either when its resemblance was pointed out. Eggman offers to give Starline a tour. I can't help but start to find it heartwarming how consistent Starline is about being happy to be around Eggman. Even though Eggman's evil, and really no one should like that monster, I just can't help but notice how extremely rare it is for him to have a right-hand man who actually likes and admires him. Simply just scared of him at best. So were Sleep and Dingo, that had to be forced into working for him. And Scratch and Grounder were just programmed to love him. This is the real deal, and Eggman's very lucky to have a friend like him. How long is this gonna last? Eggman says that he's sure he's noticed he's keeping the emeralds at hand. This throne doubles as the power generator for the entire ship. I guess it's powering more than just the airship's flight, and also computers and stuff. Because since when does one of his airships need the power of all 7 Chaos Emeralds to fly? Eggman says spaceship, and Starline seems to cringe at it. Huh? Wait, is the name of the airship Spaceship? Okay, that's kinda lame, but at least it's original. It's lazy, but it's less lazy than the Ark 2. That's what I'd come up with. At least it was lampshaded how bad it was. And it feels realistic that no matter how much of an insane fanboy he is of Eggman, there were still multiple times where he questioned him. It felt like reality ensues moments over and over again, beating you in the head with the fact that realistically, even the most avid fan of his would get tired of his idiocy if he joined him. Still, if he likes him enough to bring him back, I think he would already be familiar with how he is and respect that at that point. Eggman looks down at the ground below him through a pointlessly red-tinted glass floor viewing area. Then he shows him gray goo going into cauldrons from a slide and says that here's where the magic happens. Automated mixers blend his secret formula to create the metal virus en masse. He asks Eggman how he encodes command line and assembles the infecting particles. Particles makes me think of really small things, like spherical things, like the nanomachines. Eggman did say secret formula, and he said trade secret here. So this implies that he wants to keep Starline from going rogue, making his own metal virus, and only let him know what he needs to know. So it'd be in his best interest to lie to Starline. So he could be lying to him, trying to mislead him into thinking that metal virus is literally just a liquid, when obviously you couldn't put programming from a computer into a liquid. What are you supposed to do? Apply electricity to a liquid? That just electrify it. A magic spell on it could work though. You could cast a spell on anything, and secret formula makes you think of food, which could be applied to liquid. But just because he uses that specific terminology doesn't mean he's not talking about tiny robots, because he could just be using it metaphorically, not literally speaking. And when he says secret formula, he's probably talking about the chemicals that make up the nanobots to combine together into them. Whether he's just bullshitting him or not. Everything's made of chemicals. Technically, everything's made of a specific chemical formula. Like, you could look at a plastic water bottle and say that the secret formula to making a plastic water bottle is all the ingredients for it. Starline smiles as Eggman says that he wants to have an entire army of robot slaves, and any project would be completed in days, or even hours. Couldn't egg pawns be used for that? Not to mention nanomachines? Guess he's too stupid to think of that. In fact, why Starline assume Eggman was talking about badniks? Usually you don't think of badniks as having opposable thumbs and being bipedal. Swapbots would be more believable as things that can build stuff for him. I guess Eggman himself had no access to egg pawns at this point. I guess all of them were destroyed. Like Metal Sonic had access to them, but I guess the last of them were destroyed. So the heroes actually accomplished something by defeating robots. I would be more intimidated, but this isn't new. I'm used to it. I've already seen the concept of Eggman ruling a planet in SAD-M, and Underground, and Archie. I can just watch Sonic Underground to see what that'll be like, and it is pretty dark. I actually got tired of it after all those episodes. But I don't know if the comic's gonna get to that point, considering how slow the pacing can be. Especially since Starline says that he ran the numbers, and it's impossible for Eggman to create enough metal virus to infect the whole world, much less others. Why does he not have faith in Eggman be able to do this, when he should know better, when there's no reason for him to not have thought of what Eggman did, when he's supposed to be his biggest fan? It's not hard to write that correctly. I honestly don't see why it should matter what exactly the metal virus is made out of. I assumed it was made of iron. I guess he really is just bullshitting it, because why would one ingredient, like carbon, be a secret formula? What are nanobots made out of? Couldn't he just use any metal? I guess not. Eggman, instead of being mad at Starline for doubting him for no reason, actually says he doesn't have to. He says that here's where the metal virus will be distributed, and soon there won't be any more free will. You know, aside from Eggman, he'll have free will. And also Warbot and Cubot have it. He's not implying that he wants to change that. Hey, wait a minute, that creates a plot hole. Why did he let Warbot and Cubot have free will if he hates free will? Well, to be fair, maybe they have free will with the one limitation that they have to want to work for Eggman. That's all the advantages of a smart robot with none of the downsides of independent thought. I guess they also agree with most of his opinions. It's just confusing because it's not explained in this comic. I remember that explanation from Archie Sonic Online. He does look sympathetic when he says there will be no more illness and hunger though. That is a good point. He actually wants to get rid of that stuff. But again, does he plan on roboticizing himself? If not, that's not getting rid of illness, because he could get ill eventually. Then Starline looks scared, and I wonder if this means he's gonna turn on him. Which is a bit confusing since he was insane enough to want to return Eggman to his old self after he ruled the world for months. But he never saw him like this before. And he's disagreed with him multiple times, so that could be seen as foreshadowing to this. Eggman wants to drop the first batch of metal virus on the habitat under them. You mean on the people or on open field? I guess on the people, since he says transforming its population instantly. He says they'll wander off in every direction. Doesn't it realize that the people in trucks, buildings, and cars wouldn't get covered with it? It would literally affect everyone there instantly. But I guess that's just being pedantic of him and he's not thinking about that, and his logic is that anyone who avoided that would end up infected anyways. You know, unless they saw the news. I guess he figured you can only hide in your cars and buildings for so long, but why? He says he only needs to make a few drops. And Starline says this is brilliant and he's a visionary. But he has a nervous smile, and a pause before his second word. So what's gonna happen? Either way, I'm not sure it'll make sense. He wanted Eggman back. But he wanted him back, not Sadie and Robotnik. Eggman says that Windmill Village is going to be his first target. Just that insult to injury. Sheesh, that's dark. I hope the game purists will realize someday that IDW is darker than Shadow the Hedgehog was. Not to mention 06. But I'm already used to darkness in Sonic by now. I'm also stunned at the sheer stupidity of the fact that he's giving them the time to run away first. I assumed he'd just fly his airship over the villagers and drop the metal virus on them and fly away. Wasn't that obvious? Couldn't he make his announcement after doing that to them? Instead, he's gonna greet them over an intercom first. I told you Shadow was right about wanting to kill Eggman, because he would have prevented all of this. Oh, okay, it floods the whole village, so it doesn't actually matter that they had time to run away. Still, anybody still in the buildings would be safe. There's a lot of people in that village, a lot of people will be going to the bathroom right now. Unless the gray goo is going to stay there for a long time like floodwaters, and so no one will be able to stay in their homes for long enough to wait it out. That's still bullshit though, because you'd think they'd just call the heroes and then Tails would fly over to their roof, and they just get out onto a helicopter or plane from their window. It looks like a flat field, so all that gray goo would have nowhere to go. I have no idea why. Oh, I know why. Padding. Padding is why it's dragging out, showing multiple of the villagers getting roboticized in so many different panels. I thought just the one panel of the gray goo getting dumped on the village would be enough. Instead, there wasn't enough plot to last the whole issue, I guess. If it really isn't nanomachines, the liquid has to have a magic spell on it to be programmed to do exactly what Eggman wants. So I guess Wendy Witchcart casts the spell. If she can exist in Archie because Tails Sky Patrol was a thing, and all the games are canon to IDW, then that means Wendy Witchcart exists on this planet too, even if she wasn't shown. I just remember that issue of Sadiam Season 3 where it was explained that Cat was roboticized by nanomachines in him that were programmed to have a delayed reaction after he gets to Knothole. Specifically so that he'd go to Knothole and get everyone roboticized. No wonder I was thinking of the metal virus that way. But that's what I was saying, it makes sense if that was the plan for Sonic, and that's why he's still normal. And like Archsonic had nanomachines in it, so it wouldn't make any sense for it to be too complicated an idea for Flynn to use. I'm just baffled that we weren't told that's what the metavirus was yet. Do you think we'd be told that in the first issue? Eggman asked Starline for his thoughts while smirking. And that's just one panel dedicated to just that. Which makes me wonder if this is more foreshadowing that Starline's gonna turn on him. Because what would be the point of wasting the space otherwise? I kinda appreciate the mystery going on here over Starline. He's even shedding tears. And he pauses while talking. And there's the trope hesitation equals lying. Or it could just be tears of joy. That seems less likely to me. If he simply admired this, he'd just react to it like he did the Flying Fortress, wouldn't he? Because he already knows what the metal virus does. You'd think he wouldn't have a pleasant surprise reaction at seeing this, because he'd already know what it's about. This could be a "my god, what have I done" moment for him. And that'd be sweet of him. But again, it makes me wonder how that reaction is possible when he was sadistic or stupid enough to want Eggman back in the first place. Implying that he appreciated his evilness, because he never says anything else. He had to have known he was evil by now. He always talked as if he liked him for being an evil genius. It's not like he mostly just likes his looks and overlooks everything else. He smiles nervously while looking down at them when Eggman's not looking at him. So I guess he does support this, because he doesn't have to smile when he's not looking at him. Maybe he's just forcing himself to smile and he wants to be happy about it, but isn't? After all, what's he supposed to do even if he does turn on him? He'd find him eventually. It's been a while since I've been really angry at this comic. They basically killed off Rough and Tumble, and that's one of the most consistent things that pissed me off. So that certainly helps. The Robians all stand still until after Eggman tells them to go out and multiply. So they do follow his orders. It's not like they're literally just mindless monsters. Then I'd think it was an incompetent mistake of Eggman's, making him a complete moron. But this does benefit him the way he always wanted to. If they were literally acting like zombies, then they wouldn't understand any of the orders he was giving them. And he would have just immediately started walking around, implying they were ignoring him completely. The Robians inside AM followed orders too. If they were literally like zombies, I'd expect them to be wandering around right away, not to just politely stand at attention and wait for Eggman's order, and then follow it. So, I don't see how this is a mockery of roboticization anymore. So what if it's not exactly the same? There's been dozens of iterations of the franchise. It would be so boring. Like, after all the iterations of the franchise I've been through, I want something new. I don't know, maybe things will change completely and it'll stop being this way. Because right now, I'm just looking at the cold hard facts, and all I'm seeing is that Sadium roboticization, except infectious, which is an improvement for Eggman, and the eyes are turned red instead of black, which I also prefer. It happens much more easily than just having to put people in roboticizers, which is an improvement for Eggman. Even then, there's not much difference functionally between dropping liquid on them from above and dropping a roboticizer beam on them from above. Either way, it's a vertical thing landing on someone and roboticizing it. Now, if the metal virus turned people into giant talking banana suits, then I'd see it as a mockery, because that would be silly. And I'd really rather the comics use the term Robian or robot instead of Zombot. Which is silly, because you can't take the word bot seriously. It sounds kiddie. I'm just left confused about that. Like, is it because Flynn hates IDM so much that he's desperate to not call it Robian? Or wants to trick people into thinking this is his new idea? Or is it Sega? Did Sega forbid him from using roboticization, but somehow let him get away with this because it wasn't called that anymore? Thankfully, Tangle apologizes for making light of Sonic's situation, as I wonder why all of them are taking the risk of sitting right beside Sonic in the same room as him. People can go into deep denial in real life. I'm really wondering why they have all the time to get Tangle up to speed instead of Sonic turning right away. Oh good, Tangle decides not to high-five Sonic. Or Sonic remembers not to do that. I feel like Tangle being written to say that she just meant to do this was a bit forced. Like it's just there for a joke. Because she had no reason to think people would believe that. It appears on his arm, and Tails says that it seems like his speed can burn it off, but not cure it. I don't understand. You'd think he'd still be in the hamster bowl then. Tails wants him to run some models, as I wonder how Sonic's expected to sleep. If Tails was really smart, he'd have invented a caffeine pill so that he could completely eliminate his need to sleep. Sonic decides to run out of the house, which makes sense despite Tails telling him not to because he wants to protect them. Like how Bunny wanted to protect her friends in her nightmare about her slowly turning into a robot and a delayed reaction after what originally happened to her. Was that nanomachines too? Tango reassures Tails that he's gonna figure out a cure. Again, it was immediately obvious to me that the cure to a programmed computer virus Grey Goo apocalypse would be sending antidote nanobots at it. So if Rotor can make nanobots, Tails better too. A good writer would establish that he's going to be working on exactly that for the entire arc, and that'll be what cures it. Instead of Tails being an idiot who has no idea how to cure it the entire time when it's not something as complicated as an actual virus, it's just programming, which can be hacked and reprogrammed by a programmer. If he's working on a cure for literally as long as possible, that'll mean that when he does get the cure going, it'll be really properly earned. An actual virus would take a year to make a vaccine for. Though I don't know how long it takes to make a cure for a computer virus. Sonic wastes time thanking himself on the beach, thinking that things are different than he's used to. And the story ends with more redundant padding where we see that even a bird was roboticized. And so they can just fly anywhere in the world, which is the most dangerous roboticizer ever. We also see a tree get roboticized. Seeing how a forest get roboticized immediately reminded me of issue 152 of Archie Sonic, where we saw a forest get invaded by nanobots. And Rotor was freaking out about it because, for all he knows, it could take over the whole world. So again, the nanovirus reminds me of nanomachines. The bubble at the end says, the end of the world, but there's tons of issues after this. It annoys me when the word apocalypse is used and the term end of the world is used, when it's not literally making the planet uninhabitable and people survive it. By that logic, Sadie M is post-apocalyptic fiction. By that logic, Archie is post-end of the world. And that wasn't too depressing for people to handle. This issue is by Ian Flynn, and surprisingly doesn't end with Sonic roboticized. So technically the cover wasn't lying because it only had Sonic kinda like that. It expects us to believe that Sonic can stave off being roboticized by running, despite all the exposure to it, and the fact that he isn't spending literally the whole time running the hamster ball. I kept waiting for a proper explanation and there wasn't one. So it's really just main character powers. I can't help but be thankful that it delayed Sonic being roboticized because he's really nice in this comic. But what's the point of it just delaying the inevitable? That's a tease. This is reminding me of when Nicole was able to de-roboticize Sonic because he got a special ring from getting too many rings in his lifetime. And it gave him a protective aura that preserved his consciousness, so she could bring it back to normal because she had the data. Even that makes more sense in this because it's a magic ring, so sure. Okay, fine, but Sonic's a magical hedgehog. I guess all along, one of the magical abilities he was born with along with super speed was a specific magical ability that can run to stave off being roboticized. And he never knew about it until now. It's sloppy writing to not explain this, but whatever. I take a Deus Ex Machina over a Diabolos Ex Machina. I guess the reason I feel like going easy on this issue, aside from how much of a relief it is that it staved off Sonic being roboticized, I guess the main reason I feel like going easy on this issue is that there's not enough unexplainable idiot balls to piss me off into being in a bad mood. Tails can't simply keep Sonic tied up because he has to keep running to stave it off. And his super speed in particular is staving it off, so his slow shoes aren't something you can put on him for when he'll eventually turn into a robot. If he was smart, you'd think he'd be able to press a button so that his shoes would be altered into slow shoes by nanomachines or something. Like he could alter his shoes so that they could be turned into slow shoes with the press of a button, but whatever. The real problem with this issue is that it's a really basic plot that drags itself out for a long time considering that. I was 10 minutes into the review and still nothing really happened. A lot of the issue was wasted on Eggman roboticizing Windmill Village. The roboticization could have been covered in just one panel. The scene surrounding this ultimately added nothing to the plot. If it was gonna spend so much time on dragging the scene out, then it better actually mean something. Like it's establishing that Starline's unhappy with him now. I guess it was dragged out because It's there to make it even more dark to the audience. But we already got that before he wasted all those panels. We know how dark roboticization is. We know how dark a zombie apocalypse is. I don't know how the censors let him do this. But it did suspense well. Enough to keep me from getting bored. But in the end, I was too uncomfortable with what happened to Sonic to actually enjoy the issue.